Welcome Under the Moongate. I'm Erin Bagwell, a developing intuitive medium, awakening witch, and documentary filmmaker. Today, Patrick, Carolan, and I are speaking to Indigenous medium Shawn Leonard. Shawn is an author, speaker, and the host of Spirit Talker, a documentary series that follows Shawn as he explores his Indigenous roots and uses his psychic abilities to deliver messages of hope and healing across Canada. During our conversation, we talk about spirit totem animals, whether or not Jesus had an evacuation plan, and how everyone can unlock their psychic abilities. You don't want to miss this conversation or Shawn's polar bear story. Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you, Shawn? So nice to meet you.
Well, very nice to meet you as well. Whereabouts are you at, Erin?
I'm in Buffalo.
Buffalo, New York. Yes, I remember now.
Yep. Very close to Canada, practically Canadian.
Pretty much, yeah. I think you actually get more snow than we do.
No, we were just talking about that. I'm in Connecticut.
Connecticut. So that's pretty
Yes.
close. Wow, I've been through Connecticut. It's nice there as well.
It is. We don't get as much snow as you get in Buffalo.
No, definitely not. Well, thank you for having me on your podcast. And I think, the premise from what I understand of what you podcast about is like Wicca and stuff like this.
Yeah, we're interested in witchcraft and the history of witches. We are Wicca friendly, but I think I'm really interested in kind of the individual path that people take through their spirituality and how that manifests in different ways.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned that you had read my book as well, which I don't know how Spirit Talker found its way into your life, but I think it's pretty awesome that you're in Connecticut or Buffalo, and that the book had found you somehow. So that's amazing.
I found it through Erin. Erin said to me and said, you should read this. So that's why I got it.
Well, good.
Yeah, I was at the Omega Center, actually. It's this really small little community, and it's almost like a dorm-esque town. They've got a sanctuary. They've got a library. It's really beautiful. It feels like a higher consciousness when you're there. And they have a gorgeous, gorgeous gift shop, with amazing books and crystals and just all, for a spiritual person, it's like you have to be careful when you walk in there. And so I was walking around, and I had 8 books that I brought with me to Omega because I'm doing research for this film. And I was like, you're not allowed to buy any books. And so I'm looking around and I bought a pack of tarot cards for my friend. But then I saw Spirit Talker. And awesome. I don't know, there's just something about it that, the feather got me, I think, on your cover. Right. I'm very drawn to feathers. And I'm getting chills now. I just felt like I had to pick it up. I had to read it. And I'm so glad I did, because as a developing medium myself, I've heard a lot of interviews and I've heard glimpses of people's stories, but I think to read the longevity of your career, of your experience with spirit and working through things and feeling tested. And there was such a refreshing reminder that there's chapters to the journey and to the spiritual journey. And so it's such a beautiful read, such a comforting read. And I think the reason that I also felt really connected to it, which is something I'm excited to talk to you about now, is in the back of the book, you talk about all the different clairs, the clairvoyance, clairaudience, claircognizance, how kind of spirit manifests when you're meditating, whether you hear it or see it, for people who don't know the definitions. But I loved that you were so open and so generous in having people access it themselves. And I feel like there are a lot of spiritual communities that gatekeep who has access to our intuition, our higher selves, our guides. And so I love in the book that you gave out meditations and you really laid it out and you were super clear. Can you talk a little bit about kind of how or why you were inspired to kind of share that story at the end of the book?
Well, the whole book, my whole life has been a journey, obviously, and we're all on a journey. We all have our own individual journey of learning and different experiences that happen to us. And, I think, Spirit's teaching each and every one of us, if we're available, we're open, we show up, there's that invitation, open invitation that that we want to experience Spirit itself, then Spirit will show up. And why I wanted to share with people that understanding, because there's a lot of there's a lot of people there that don't really understand really what psychic abilities are and how this kind of manifests through people like us, right? So I wanted to have to give people a real clear idea of how this process works. And not because, you need to come to me or I'm the one that needs to do the session for you, because that's ridiculous. Because, I'm helping you remember who you are.
Mm.
And I'm helping you remember that connection that we all have. It's not an elitist group. It's not like just for certain and special people or people who are on a platform or what have you. It's for everyone. And, there's just there's different levels of people who have passion in regard to psychic and psychic medium abilities. But I wanted to at least give people a good, clear understanding to explore it for themselves. Because when you start to explore it, it's, the coolest thing is why don't you go see Shawn Leonard live on stage, which I'm doing here on Friday in Halifax to a sold out crowd here for 600 people. That's amazing that I'm going to be up there doing sessions and people are going to have validation and healing and messages, etc. But you know what? You too are also connected to the same source. And it's when you start to delve into that, understand the mechanics of how this expresses itself through you, then when you start to open up, the greatest gift that you can give yourself is not to receive a reading from me. The greatest gift of, knowledge and wisdom is to have this experience happen through you. And when you realize at some point in your life, if you do the work, because there's some exercises involved in reawakening, your understanding of clairvoyance, clairsentience, clairaudience, and claircognizance, and learning how to kind of work with the clairs, etc. Way back when this all kind of unfolded for me, as the book described, I didn't have words to describe these things. I didn't know. It wasn't until I had the experience that I started to delve into the mechanics of how that all just took place. I'm like, okay, this happened. This was real. This is
Right.
this is a big deal. This is not I'm not making this up. But for the longest time, there was a part of my brain that thought, maybe I'm just somehow I'm a mind reader. Maybe somehow I don't know. Maybe I just have extra perception about people. And then it came to things that were coming to me because I started to delve into it more and trust it more, that I would start to know things that no one could know. And that's what got my awareness. It perked up my psychic antennas and go, okay, there's something really going on here. And this is big. And it was like the language revealed itself to me. And then I actually started to kind of delve into it deeper and wanting to know more, because I'm like, okay, well, I know I'm hearing these things. First of all, I wanted to prove I wasn't schizophrenic. So
always a good thing to do.
Right, because there's a fine line there. Is this real or not real? Is this in my imagination? And since Spirit Talker came out, I think they obviously liked the book because they've offered me another 2-book deal. So I'm working on my second book for Hay House.
Great.
And that premise of that book is about spirit totem animals or guidance from spirit animals. So I'm really going to delve into that a little bit more and helping people understand that greater. Because not only do we have spirit people with us as an Indigenous person, and you as well, being a Wiccan or a witch, there's this deep connection to nature and all of the energy that surrounds us, right? But that includes the many nations that are within the world, whether it's the animal nation that walks upon the earth, or the butterflies, the dragonflies, the birds, the ones that fly, the winged ones, the ones that are in the water. We're connected to everything, and there's a spirit in everything. And the medicine that each of these animals carry, some are very unique and specific, are very deeply connected to us in unique ways.
I had a friend who wanted me to do a cleansing for her because she was having a lot of bad travel luck. And so she, was losing her passport and lost her wallet, and just over and over again. And so I was like, all right, let me sit down and meditate and see what I can get for you. And I just heard the call of a wolf. And then I was surrounded by wolves and I just kept seeing them over and over again. And so I talked about it with her and we are like, okay, what does the wolf mean to you? And, what can we learn, from Indigenous communities that have, used the wolf and, all of the different beautiful ways that nature can teach us. So I think that was my first reading that an animal came through, and now I get them quite frequently.
Well, that's amazing. That's awesome. I'm grateful that you are working with the Animal Nation. But I'm going to tell you, like for me, like even though I'm an Indigenous person, I'm a Mi'kmaq from Eastern Canada, Nova Scotia, that, I knew I was part of the Bear Clan. But that's as far as my knowledge went. And then once I started to embrace the Animal Nation differently, I had a different relationship with the Animal Nation. Then next, I'm rescuing animals. The sick crow's coming to my house. The raccoon that's got a bad paw. I became like Dr. Dolittle all of a sudden, where there was different little animals that were coming to me, and I would help them be well and move on their journey. Now, it's kind of slowed down, except for a few stray cats here and there. But when you shift your energy towards the Animal Nation, because everything is energy, right? And animals can read that as well, and they know that you're open to that, then they will shift their energy towards you. But I wasn't taught that we had spirit animal totems. Like I knew I had a totem, like a family totem.
Can you say more about the totems? Because
I can.
So
I'll teach a little bit about right now.
And you write about it in Spirit Talker, but it's so beautiful to learn.
I have, one of the totem animals that watches over me particularly is the Wabak Moon, which is the white bear. The white bear, which is the polar bear. I didn't even know I had a polar bear connection, to be honest.
It's kind of a bit like a random animal, Absolutely. You're not seeing a polar bear every day.
No, and it was in a dream, like in where you're in your kind of your spirit form. I was in the astral world, like, where there's these people chasing me, as a typical dream sometimes goes, where you're trying to run away or get away from somebody or something, and you just can't get away. And I was in a field. And as I was running through this field, I looked at the other side of the field, and, because there were 7 people chasing me, and I thought, okay, well, I'm running as fast as I can through this field to get away. And I couldn't quite make out who they are, but there were shadows. And on the other side, these polar bears walked out of the woods. And I thought, why the hell is polar bears walking out of the woods? Don't they live up north or something, Why are they walking out of the trees? But these polar bears start to run towards us. And in my dream, I'm like, crap, now I got dark people chasing me. I got polar bears trying to eat me. So I start running the other way. I was less scared of the shadows than I was of the polar bear. So here I'm running, and I figured if I could outrun them, they would eat them first, and I'd be okay. So I ran as fast as I could. And at some point, I realized I could not outrun the polar bears. I couldn't outrun the people. And somewhere in the middle of the field, I just fell to my knees and surrendered. I surrendered to what was about to happen, what was going to take place. I surrendered to thinking that I was going to die in this dream, figuratively, of course. And that's not what happened. Each of the polar bears had run past me, and the shadows that were chasing me were still running. And it was like the polar bears would pounce on the shadow. And as they would pounce on the shadow, it's like they would just disintegrate. There was no like viciousness. It was just that they would just land on this dark shadow figure, and this shadow figure would just kind of dissipate into nothing. And then after all 7 polar bears had pounced on these 7 shadow figures, these polar bears all kind of merged into one bear. It was like they became one bear together. And the bear stood there and stared at me. And then I woke up. I was like, oh my God, that polar bear wasn't there to hurt me. That polar bear was there to help me, all 7. And I realized that, I had a spirit animal totem that was there to protect me through dark times or things that I might be struggling with in life. And that's how it revealed itself to me. So after that moment, I was so inspired. I thought, okay, I really like to have something tangible to kind of connect that dream, that memory that I have. I'd love to have a polar bear claw. And I put it out to the spirit world. I said, listen, spirit, great creator, Gazulk, Wabak Moon, the great white bear. If you're connected to me in life and you're part of my spirit, to help me and guide me through life and protect me in different ways. Send me a claw. I want one of your claws. I don't know how you're going to send it to me, but I'm requesting that you send me a polar bear claw. And then I let it go, thinking, okay, well, that's a very strange thing to request, but I thought, well, you never know, right? Because with spirit, I mean, through my years, if you don't talk with spirit, you don't engage with spirit, you don't ask for what it is that you need help with, how you're going to be heard, how are they supposed to know what you need help with in life? So I just needed validation in a very tangible, physical way that with a claw. And after like a month or so, I started looking online. I'm like, okay, well, maybe I'll look on eBay or
maybe I
I'll
gotta help spirit out and
exactly.
online shopping.
I'm like, I really want this claw.
Available.
I'm looking on eBay and there's like gold-plated fake claws of polar bears, and I'm like, this just doesn't feel right, And I thought, no, I can't do this, but I so wanted one so bad to kind of like remember that moment and that encounter that I had in the dream. So I let it go, and then another month or so had gone by, and then a little package come in the mail. And it was from a lady named Barbara Kent Bishop from Newfoundland, Canada. And she's in my online course, and she just went to Labrador, Canada, which is a very cold and remote place where there's lots of polar bears. And, she didn't tell me she was going. I didn't tell her about the polar bear. I didn't tell her about the dream. She just went there. And while she was there, because she's very interested in Indigenous culture, she met some elders there, Innu elders. I mean, back in the old days, we would have called them Eskimos, but they're Innu elders. So she met with one of these guys, and he says, you know what? I have a gift for you. Actually, I have two gifts. I have these polar bear claws I'm supposed to gift to someone. And I'm giving you two of them. One is for you. But this other one, I don't know who it's meant for, but you're meant to give it to someone. And you have to gift it to them. So she grabs it, brings it home and ponders, who should I send this claw to? And she goes, you know what? I'll send it to Shawn. I think maybe he would really love this gift. And she wrote a little note and she put it on like a hide thing, put some beads with it, and put in a little red package, because red is very important to Indigenous people, like covering our sacred objects, especially for the Mi'kmaq people. So I open this, and it's a little red thing. I open it up and I pull it out, and it was this claw. And it's the polar bear claw that I had asked for. And I cried. I literally cried, because I was like, oh my God, how
it came.
How is that even you got to think that's not possible in some people's realities.
Can I ask you, I feel like when those moments happen, and I've talked to friends about this, that it feels addicting, when you connect to spirit in such an intense way. And I feel like then you go into lulls where there's no magic and nothing's happening.
Yeah, but I don't need magic all the time. That's where I am.
Tell me.
Like when those moments do happen, what I do feel is, and it's just like signs from loved ones or things like that. A lot of people look for feathers from somebody that they love, or they know a feather is being sent to them from somebody particular, or it could be a frog, or it could be a dragonfly, what have you. I mean, there's different things that people associate to different people for different reasons, right? And when somebody passed, and for me, it was like dimes when my dad died. He sent me oodles and oodles of dimes. They were just popping up everywhere. I'd be home and a dime would fall in the living room mid-air. Nobody home but me, but you could hear it hit the floor. And you walk out there and there'd be dimes sitting there. And that went on for some time, that's like amazing. And then they stopped. And, I love my father. I love my father in the spirit world. I love the people who have moved on into the light of the other side, et cetera, wherever they are. And I know that they're in a good space. And I don't need a pocket full of change to validate for me. It's nice that when they did do it, to kind of really get my attention, but I don't need that all the time. I just don't. And so, like you said, there could be lulls for a long period of time. And even with my father, I still feel him around me. I sense him, and he'll find different ways to communicate. He used to play the guitar. House of the Rising Sun was his favorite song, and he would play it and sing it, and he did it amazingly well. And now it's my ringtone on my phone, so I hear it all the freaking time. But but he would find unique ways to send it to me, and I'd think of him and have a little chit chat. So it didn't have to be the dime. It was just there was other ways that, and in other ways that spirit can communicate, not just the one way that we believe.
Mm-hmm.
And it's multitudes of ways. And I don't really feel like I need them all the time. I told my dad, I appreciate you doing this and that and whatever, but, don't feel like you have to do it. I know you're around me. I can talk to you. I will remember you. I'll speak to you. You don't need to throw the dimes, the feathers, whatever. It's been great, but let's, I don't have a disconnection thought.
Mm.
I know I'm connected. I know they can hear me. And I know, if I really needed something, they would come through.
I know you can feel it in your body when those things happen, because you kind of know. I did a workshop about signs and getting signs from your ancestors, because I get a lot of signs, and we talked a lot about, what are the ways it's really for you? How do you know it's real? And it's like your whole body will react when you have that full physical feeling. It's even if it's something so small or insignificant, or somebody else would have not felt it. It's a body reaction. Shawn, I feel like I could ask you a million questions. Sure. I want to throw it over to Patrick and see.
Okay, Patrick.
Great. Thank you. And let me just share a little bit about myself, first of all, so sort of where I'm coming from. But I just wanted to throw this in there. When I was a kid, I learned how to play the guitar. And the first song I learned was The House of the Rising Sun.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. I didn't play it very well, but it was an easy song to learn and to sing. So I still play once in a while. So, just putz around. So just, Aaron and I are working together on this film. My background is I'm Catholic. I was raised Catholic. I'm still consider myself Catholic. Kind of a different branch of the Catholic Church than, most of our priests and bishops today. I also worked for the Franciscans for 10 years. And so I got really engulfed in Franciscan spirituality.
Right.
And when I'm listening to you talk, I'm sorry.
Just not to cut you off, but I really strongly feel this is like a many lifetime thing for you. I think that you've been very spiritual through many lifetimes. Probably have been a Franciscan monk yourself through a couple other lifetimes. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's why this kind of soul calling is like speaking to you. And it's like, even though there's you're learning about other things. I mean, I feel like most priests, and even though they have a dogma from which they follow, I feel like that they too have their own beliefs and experiences. I mean, how could you not if you're a spiritual person? You have to experience spirit. And I really feel as you speak, I mean, and again, sorry to interrupt you, but I really feel this like multitude of lifetimes that you've lived in this alignment of person that you are right now. Exactly.
Yeah, I actually feel the same way. And I don't consider myself a medium or anything like that at all. But I sense that. I feel
not yet, that. Patrick. We're getting you closer.
But my question is, so several years, I'm also an activist. So I'm considered one of the leading Catholic activists in the country. I've been, involved in, if there was demonstrations happening in Washington, D.C. on justice and peace, I'm probably one of the people that organized it and was arrested at it. And I was one day there was this whole demonstration. It was around climate, and it was more on the pipelines being built. And it was an interesting coalition that got together. It was Native Americans and ranchers, and they called themselves the CIA, the Cowboy and Indian Alliance. And they came and they set up tents on the wall in Washington, D.C. and had a demonstration for about a week there. And one day I was there most of the time, doing stuff. And I went into this tent one day, and there was a Native American chieftain there, an Indigenous chieftain. He was all by himself. And I apologized. I thought he was in Perry. He said, "No, come and sit." And so I sat with him. And I have, so I'll show you. This is my, if I can get it open there. This is my Tau cross that I always wear. It's a symbol of the Franciscans.
Okay.
And I don't know if you can see up there.
I can see it there, yes.
And I had that on, and he asked me about it. And so I started explaining to him about, this Franciscan spirituality, what it means, how I see it. And he listened, and then he looked at me and he said, "That's the exact same thing we believe in." And it was just for me, that was really an aha moment of that. So how do we go forth? I mean, Farah and I had a discussion. Our spiritualities are the same. We may have gotten to it from different ways, and we may practice it a little differently, but it's exactly the same spirituality. I'm confident that if you and I had a longer conversation, we'd find the same thing about us, that our spiritual beliefs are the same. We just practice it this way or that way. What do you think? How do we get like folks to start to think about that a little bit more, and really start to come together around the singular spirituality, which would be centered around just the interconnectedness of all creation? And
that's an indigenous teaching and belief system that has been around forever, predominantly,
yes,
right?
absolutely.
With indigenous people. And I think, I personally, how I've been approaching it is because I have my core Spirit Talker tribe. So it allows people who are very interested in the genre of work that I do, but also helping them understand that interconnectedness. And, I don't know. I don't necessarily feel like we need to have like a particular building or a particular place, because I think that there's no place that Spirit isn't. Right? There's no place that Spirit isn't, whether it's New York or Connecticut or Nova Scotia, Canada. No, it's everywhere. There's no place that Spirit is not. But I think it's just teaching people through whatever belief systems to engage it, to interact with it, to not be fearful of it, to be in an unconditional loving space, because that's who we are. That's where we come from, is that space. I mean, the ego, the human ego, and thinking that that we only have the one way or right way or et cetera like that. I mean, there's many, like you said, there's many roads that lead to Rome or wherever you want to go, I guess. They all lead to the same place. And we all come from the same place. We're going to return to the same place. There's not like a special group for special people. Even atheists or people who do believe nothing, they have purpose and different purposes and things to fulfill. And I don't know, other than just being who you are authentically and engaging with the environment and nature and the spirit that is in connection to everything. I know in Indigenous culture we have a word called Msitnogama in Mi'kmaq, which means we're all related, we're all connected.
Yes.
And so I share those teachings as freely as I can in podcasts and books and every way that I can get out there, not to form a necessary religion, but to have a new understanding of spirit and spirituality. And in each person, spirit is working through me in a unique and special way. Spirit's working through you in a unique and special way, and Spirit's working through Aaron as well in a unique and special way. And I feel like people that have this kind of like, you're being inspired by Spirit. You've stepped into this role to come into life to help shift and change the world in the greatest way that you can. Because, and I think each of us are teaching a way of life to live in balance and harmony with Spirit and nature and the world itself. And that's what we're no different than that man that walked 2,000 years ago that was trying the very same thing.
Yeah. And it's like I write a lot also, and I've written this and I asked this question: do you think Jesus came with a building plan or an evacuation plan? Because most of our theology today, most of our religion today is centered on an evacuation plan. We're here so we can get to there. Everything Jesus talked about, everything Jesus talked about was creating the kingdom of heaven here.
Absolutely. And it's within you, right? It's there.
Yeah, it's everywhere. I mean, I learned it, as a kid from the Sisters of Mercy, Baltimore Catechism. You probably learned this too, Aaron, that God is everywhere and in everything. Right. And remember, I asked the priest one time, well, why do we lock God up in the tabernacle after Mass on Sunday if God is everywhere and in everything? Right. That got me in trouble, but
Right. And Indigenous people, would say that, we have to honor the spirit of the trees, the rocks, the ocean, grandfather sun and grandmother moon and all that, right? But, Jesus said the same things back 2,000 years ago, lift up a rock and you'll find me there. I don't think he said me. Like me as an ego that you're going to find me in there. You're going to find, you look it up here, oh, there's Jesus. Oh, there's Jesus. No, it's the light that exists within everything that he could see within himself and see in other people. and there's no place that it isn't. It's the same teaching.
Yeah.
It's the same teaching.
Yeah, and it's the same teaching that St. Francis of Assisi taught. And it's also the same teaching that, I don't know if you're familiar with the Sufi mystic Rumi.
Yeah.
And interesting story about, if you read the poetry of Rumi and the poetry of Francis, they're almost identical.
Yeah.
But yet they were alive around the same time, but there's no record of those two ever meeting or connecting with each other. Yet their poetry is very, very similar. And It's the same about just the whole interconnectedness. So let me ask you this. Okay. Do you see the change happening? I mean, and I'm asking this not from the physical perspective, but in spirit. You're much more connected to spirit world than I would be. And do you see in spirit world that change happening? I see it in physical world. I see change happening. I see it's a slow process. But I think, it says there was a Jesuit priest in the early 20th century, Teilhard de Chardin. And Teilhard wrote that, and he was a brilliant writer and thinker. And he wrote that we either evolve or we'll be annihilated. And he wasn't talking about a physical evolution. He was talking about a spiritual evolution, and how, as a Catholic Church, we really need to evolve our thinking a little bit. And I see that happening in the church. And lots of churches, not just my church, but a lot of churches. But do you see that happening also in spirit world? Is it? I'm asking because I'm trying to be really hopeful that change is going to happen sooner.
From the glimpses I've had of the spirit world, because I have memories of being there while still being alive. Like, I've been to the other side and remembered that I've been there. Mm-hmm. And being there, I never ever feel that there was any type of like separation between any people at all. Like, we were just one group of people, and like literally trillions and trillions of spirits on the other side that we all knew that we were all connected. We were all the same. There was no different, and we all and again, we all have a purpose here. The atheist has a purpose, and I think. It doesn't mean that there will be atheists forever, maybe, and that's okay. So it's really accepting people where they are. Mm-hmm. I mean, you have a calling to come into the world to shift and change it in the ways that you are, and I have the calling to come in to shift and change the world in the way that I can. Doesn't mean I'm going to change the whole world. No, probably not. But it's like, when light spreads throughout the world, I mean, there's, your light in Connecticut, your light in Buffalo, there's different lights around the world, and there's many lights that are there. And it's helping, help people find their way out of the darkness from which they experience each day through life by feeling that disconnection. How many years has it taken women to have equal rights, even in the United States?
Still working on it.
Right. Like, equal pay, we are getting there. Yeah. And each of us that show up in life and be the people we need to be, that we're called forth to be that person in this lifetime to the greatest of your capacity, whoever and wherever you are. And you will shift and change the world. And it may be hopefully quicker than I have maybe beliefs about, because those are belief systems that I have that it's going to take a long time. Maybe it could happen a lot faster than that. And I think, with today's technology,
yes.
Look at us. We're having a video conference like 30 years ago, right? I dreamed about having a phone that I could see my grandma and talk to her on.
It's crazy.
And now we're like, you're in 3 different cities. We're here streaming to a multitude of people in different places, having a conversation about shifting and changing the world and everybody's spirit and their spirituality. Like, that was not possible 50 years ago, or not even 30 years ago.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
And look how far we've come in 30 years.
Well, that's the mantra of the documentary that we're working on is about allowing women the space to remember. And I think part of my coming out of the broom closet story was really having to reckon with the witch's wound, and knowing that I'm safe, and knowing that I can speak up, and knowing I can use my voice. But we've had so many generations of being silenced. And so really the film is a celebration's not the right word, but an opening.
Right.
Which involves hopefully an awakening.
Awakening, yes.
I'm wondering, Shawn, do you have any, do you know any witches? If I were to say the word witch, like what do you think of in your brain when you hear that word?
Well, I think it's just women who are very deeply connected to nature and spirit. That's, and not only women, I feel like men as well. Like, I don't think it's, I don't really think negatively about it at all. I think very optimistically and positively. Like, I think, where we've come, and even my wife, who in the Indigenous community, my great grandmom was a medicine woman. She was the only medicine woman, the last medicine woman in my Indigenous community in Newfoundland. And I even know she was resistant to even moving into a home. She lived in a wigwam, for the longest time until they forced her into a home. Wow. She didn't want to leave her wigwam, and she would go and help, people bear children. She would go bring different medicines for things. She was just a person who cared about people and had an understanding of spiritual medicine and plant medicine, etc. And when I think about what is Wiccan, what is, witches and stuff like that, I think it's all in alignment with that. And because Wiccan or witches is predominantly was probably formed in the thought process of that in Europe, that doesn't mean, even though we were disconnected, and Indigenous people in North America we're already practicing the same thing, just in a little bit uniquely different way.
Yeah, even the medicine wheel with the 4 elements, every witch altar has, earth, air, fire, water. Part of Absolutely. It. So there, all these ideas and beliefs are so interconnected.
So even though we're separate in different continents, and different peoples, different, yet there's something that's trying to express itself through humanity, and through people, whether they're men or women. But back in the day, I think it's gotten this really kind of negative idea. Even Nostradamus back in the day was practicing plant medicine, and they were going to bar him from the university because he was a prophet and he practiced plant medicine. Wow. It's so silly. And but we've grown, we're growing into that understanding greater, and it's not like it's just ceremony too. It's just how you practice that practice is ceremony.
Yeah.
And Indigenous people, and there's many different Indigenous peoples. There's the Mohawk, there's the Anishinaabe people, there's many different nations down in the U.S. I mean, there's the Cree in Canada, and there's also like the Inuit.
Cherokee, right in Western New York, Comanche
they
in
all
Oklahoma.
Have different ceremonies.
Yeah.
Different ceremonies, but very deeply connected to nature, plant medicine, engaging with the spirit world and the spirit of all things. They may have different ceremonies from which they approach it, but there's a lot of similarities between all the Indigenous cultures. And I think the same thing with Wiccan. I would say Wicca or Wiccan practices are probably very much like that, just different ceremonies, very deeply connected in the same ways and how they approach it. And I think it's in alignment with everything that Indigenous people have been doing for a long time.
A theme of the podcast is that there's no rules in magic.
No.
Everyone practices in their own way, their own ceremonies, their own. It keeps coming up over and over, and it is very similar to another theme of the podcast, which is everyone has a different definition of the witch. She means so many things to so many different people, and so that's just a piece of it too.
And there's actually a very live and thriving, Wicca community in Nova Scotia, and I know that there's many people that, practice Wicca, and and I don't know that much about it myself, because that's what speaks to them, and my approach is the Indigenous way, and I accept them however they choose to approach it. It's their choice and their way to connect to spirit. I think it's amazing that they're doing it. I'm just really happy that people are celebrating themselves and that spiritual connection that they have with all things spirit and nature together.
Beautiful. Well, this has been such an enriching hour. This has been so wonderful. I'm so grateful that you took the time to
Yes. Thank you
meet
so
with
much.
us and to chat. I feel very invigorated and inspired after this conversation. So I feel like I was complaining about the full moon and being sluggish, and I feel like this was like just what I needed, a little boost.
Just a little bit.
So thank you, Shawn. We end every episode by asking our guest this question: you might be a witch if. How would you answer that sentence?
I don't know if I could answer that. I would, I don't like to I don't like to I don't like to say people are one thing or not, or I mean, I'd say you might be a witch if it speaks to you through your heart, and that's the spirituality that you wish to express to the world.
That's perfect.
It's funny because 4 minutes ago you did say a definition of the witch.
Oh, did I?
About being connected to nature and men and women, and so it's which is
but
just
the
fun
other interesting thing I think is, and you remember this, Aaron, when we had Elia on and you asked her that question, and Elia is a Franciscan nun who's, a scientist and a theologian, and she answered almost exactly the same way you did.
Okay. Well, that's good.
Yeah.
I think there's sort of a similar idea.
We're getting
about things
somewhere here.
We are. Yeah. We're all connected. We're all connected, and we all come
we
from
absolutely
the same place.
are.
How we celebrate that connection, I think, is amazing in every way. I don't think there's one way that it's better or greater or less than another. I think if they all come from a place of love, then I think it's amazing.
Perfect way to end. Shawn, thank you so much for your time.
Sure.
Yeah, we'll get it going, and I appreciate you.
I appreciate you for finding me, reading the book, and asking me to be the guest. I really like speaking and talking about spirituality, and that connection. I think it's amazing that like I said, that we're having this conversation in like when I was a kid, I was like, picking up my dial-up phone with the big long cord and, ringing it's like where we are today. We're growing, we're evolving, and it's helping us connect even greater throughout the world. And I feel so blessed to be able to connect with the both of you today.
Under the Moongate is produced and hosted by me, Erin Bagwell. To get episodes delivered to your inbox and get access to over 50 bonus episodes, join me as a paid subscriber on Substack at underthemoongate.substack.com. And to learn more about my new documentary about the forgotten goddess era, the burning times, and a modern woman's quest for divinity, visit theresurrectionofthewitch.com. And pass the magic along. Rate, review, subscribe, and share this episode with a friend. Plus, if you want episodes delivered to your inbox, you can join me on Substack as a free subscriber. Okay, thanks so much for listening.